and wondrous Dharma
is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas.
is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas.
Now we can see and hear it.
Now we can see and hear it.
Accept and maintain it.
Accept and maintain it.
May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth.
May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. Okay. So I'd like to share a story within a story. I'm going to look at the King of Sutras, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, and I'd like to share with you some from book 35. This is called The Qualities of the Buddha's Embellishments and Lights. All right, so it's a story. It's a story. But the unique thing about this story is it's a different kind of story than we're used to. If you think about how we understand stories in the West, in our society, and in the world in general, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And usually there's something good at the beginning, something bad happens towards the end of the beginning. Then there's efforts to resolve that whatever bad happened in the middle. And then the end is how that got resolved and everything's better again. Right? Would you follow? Is that a usual storyline? That's the usual storyline of things. And this story is also a story, but if we are looking for that kind of storyline, it's not going to make sense because the problem is resolved at the very beginning of the story. The problem gets resolved at the very start of the story, and then it's about how to maintain that. How to maintain that resolution and to keep going from there. That's kind of how meditation works in Zen practice too. But usually we come to meditation practicing, okay, I've got a problem. Now I'm basically a good person, but I've got a problem and I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to get it resolved. And this is the effort I'm going to put into it. It's going to get resolved. And then at the end of the story, it's resolved. But with Zazen practice, it's resolved at the very start of the practice. And the practice is about how to maintain that resolution, right? That's a difference. It's a different way of orienting towards what we think of as a problem. We think we start with a problem that we have to solve. But there's no problem to be solved, and that's the beginning point. So you wonder, it seems like I just gave away the whole the whole thing, right? If there's no problem to be resolved, then why am I here? Right? What's the catch? There's no, but that, so what's the catch? We're always looking for a catch when we're opening up a story. There's got to be something, right? There's got to be a problem, and then, okay, that's how they get it resolved. Okay. So this particular story is demonstrating what I can see. What I will share is there's three qualities to this particular story, and if we can keep these three qualities in mind, as well as what I just explained about the nature of stories in the Avatamsaka Sutra, then we won't have any problem understanding it. But if we don't keep that in mind, it'll be difficult to understand. So the first one is that the world is completely interconnected. This story starts with it not only assumes, it demonstrates through how it's shared that everything is completely interconnected. Right, that's number one. And usually we don't start from a place of interconnectedness. We start from a place of separation, at least in our head. But this is remember, the Avatamsaka Sutra is putting words to reality. So it's saying, one, everything is interrelated. So if you think you have a problem, it's not just you that has a problem. Right? The second thing is that there is no origination. There's no origin to anything. There's not we can't, usually, again, this flies in the face of our Western way of conceiving things, that if there is existence, there must be a cause, right? If something exists, we got to go. We can trace it back and find an origin point. And this is saying, this is asking us to see the non-origination of things, including the self. But in this particular story, it focuses on the non-origination of the three poisons: greed, hate, delusion, and the non-origination of the self. Okay, so that's the second point I think that's made in the story. And the third point is the vastness of reality, the infinity of things that we just can't get our minds wrapped around. Things are so huge and immense that we just can't wrap our minds around it. And it has a unique way of talking about these three things that we're probably not used to. But if you keep these three things in mind, then I think you can grab hold of this story and follow it to the best of your abilities. So let's start with the story. The name is The Qualities of the Buddha's Embellishments and Lights. What's an embellishment? I'm just curious. I should have looked it up before I started talking about embellishments. My understanding is an embellishment is something like some kind of a quality. But what do you hear there with embellishment?
Something fancy.
Something fancy? Okay.
Something extra.
Something extra.
Something like a decoration.
A decoration.
To make it beautiful or to make it more interesting.
I love it. Yes, yes. Yeah, I think that's the one, is the something that makes it more interesting. So these are the embellishments this is about the embellishments of the Buddha. So we're making the Buddha, like, what are these embellishments of the Buddha? All right. These embellishments really are something else here. Then the world-honored one, who's the world-honored one?
The Buddha.
The Buddha, right? The world-honored one said to the enlightening being, jewel hand. Jewel hand. That's his name, or her name. We don't know what gender this bodhisattva is. But the bodhisattva's name is jewel hand. Take a look at your own hand for a second, right? Is there a jewel there? We don't usually think of our hands as containing jewels unless we put like a ring on it or something. Then we think, oh, maybe I got a jewel on my hand. But this is saying the hand is a jewel, right? The jewel hand. What does that mean? If we take this literally, my hand's obviously not made of crystal. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have a jewel hand? The bodhisattva, because remember, the names of the bodhisattvas are significant in Buddhist lore. The names themselves have meaning. But if you look at if you look at the palm of your hand and see, I mean, in a sense, this hand that you have is a jewel. It's a gem. It's so valuable, just like a jewel our hands are absolutely priceless. Think of what you could not do without hands. Or how would you live without a hand? Life would be so different. without a hand. So this is calling our attention to the pricelessness of our hands. It's not just the Bodhisattva's hands, it's your hand, right? Your hands. I mean, how many doors can you open with a hand? I mean that literally. How many doors can you, but I also mean that figuratively, you know? Dharma gates are endless. I vow to enter them. How could you enter a Dharma doorway without your hand? You've got to grasp, this ability to grasp, right? Yeah.
Right, and that's a physical reality. But then, like, Kuan Yin has her hand out in terms of the ultimate, which is giving.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's that too. There's the physicalness, but there's also the aspect of giving and the opening of the hand. So yeah, I mean, think of all the the generosity that comes through this process. Yeah.
And also I was thinking in terms of blessings, there is something that hand does when people are blessed, that
Yes.
the hand transmits something, or just it indicates the blessing.
It does. Yeah, the hand indicates a blessing, right? That's another thing. And there's all kinds of mudras, right? There's this mudra that the Buddha holds, or this mudra, the no fear mudra. There's all kind, and this, there's so many mudras. We hold the cosmic mudra when we sit zazen. So we just take, there's about 6 pages here of stuff. I just got through half of a sentence or so. All right. So the Buddha talks about the Buddha, the world honored one, said to the enlightened, what did he say? What did he say? Offspring of Buddha, the perfectly enlightened one, has an embellishment called the foremost sphere, from which emanates a great light called effulgence. Now listen to this, with 7 million infinities of light rays. 7 million infinities, not one infinity. 7 million. Try to get your mind wrapped around that number. So again, like, here's the point. The point is to bring our minds to a spaciousness, because our minds are just so contracted. And especially in a modern time, our minds are so contracted. It's almost unrealistic to think of light or think of things in these terms, right? Just think of the word that, when I say infinity, it seems like a lot. But let's put 7 million before the word infinity. And what does the mind do? Like, we can't even get our minds wrapped around the number 7 million, let alone infinities. 7 million infinities. Wow. Okay, so that's one embellishment of the Buddha. Right? He's got 7 million infinities of light rays. When I was an enlightening being in the palace of Tushita heaven, okay, so this Tushita heaven appears in many of the sutras. Let's just know that it's a heavenly realm, and he was there at one time. The Buddha was there at one time. Again, this is the story. This is the story. I'm not saying that this is the only story, right? I'm not saying that this is the true story. I'm just saying it's a story. It's a mythology. All right, so we got to put our minds in the mode, the narrative mode, the mythological mode of reception. All right, so he was in this palace of Tushita heaven. I emanated a great light, and there's a name to this light. He gives names, right? He gives names to everything. It's interesting. When we do zazen, we take the names off of things. We don't try to name. We don't try to name things, but sometimes we do, especially if you practice like some form of vipassana. Then naming is it was an important thing, right? If you're finding yourself getting caught up in thinking and thoughts and in the whirlwind of feelings around thoughts, and you're finding your mind just captured by them in a negative way, then you can label your thought. You can say, oh, thinking. And that label itself can be very helpful for dismantling our over connection to our identity with our thoughts. We identify ourselves with our thinking mind. That's the root problem. We identify with our thinking. All right, so by labeling thoughts, that helps us to disentangle the self from thoughts. But here the Buddha is doing the opposite. He's putting a label on something great. We often put the labels on something negative that we want to let go of. Right? In a context of meditation, you can label thoughts as a means to, because the thoughts are oftentimes have a negative association. But here the Buddha is putting a label on something very positive that really can't be named. You know, I could never think to call a great light banner king. He just says it's a great light, and he names it light banner king. The great light called light banner king, illuminating. Let's go on. Illuminating as many worlds as atoms. Here it is, another set of infinity. Illuminating as many worlds. Try to get your mind wrapped around this. As atoms in 10 Buddha lands. Now, Buddha land is a land of immense size. And so take the number of atoms, right? We're talking about electrons, protons, and neutrons. Take the number of atoms in one Buddha land. Right? How many is that? How many atoms we got it, right? How many atoms are, and multiply that by 10. 10 Buddha lands. The sentient beings in the hells of those worlds who were touched by this light gained respite from their torments, and they obtained 10 kinds of pure eyes, ears, nose, tongue, bodies, and minds, and all danced for joy. See, the problem is resolved right at the start. Well, the problem got resolved right at the beginning. When you touch the Buddha's light, the problem is done. That's what we're starting out with in Zazen. We're sitting on the seat of enlightenment. That's the practice. So immediately, as soon as the light of the Buddha touches you, the problem is solved. Right? If you're in a hell realm, now it says talking about hell. It's talking about hell. And each of us can find ourselves in a place of torment at times. When their lives ended, because in the Buddhist tradition there's this thing called reincarnation. We didn't start from a conception or birth, and we don't end at death, right? It keeps going. When their lives ended, they were reborn in Tushita heaven, right? Because they got a little seed, they got a little touch of the light of the Buddha, and they realized, hey, things can be a lot better than they are right now. Right? That's great news. Things can be a lot better than they are right now. If we're suffering, that's the message of the Buddha. Things can be that's what the Buddha does for us, right? He sends out those light beams. What are those light beams? The Dharma, the teachings. He sends them out to us. And when they touch us deeply, right? And that's what we're opening ourselves to when we're sitting. We're getting touched by the Dharma. He sends out and that resolves the issues. We get a different, how did that go? You can't solve the problem at the same level of thinking that the problem was created, right? So the Buddha gives us a shift in perception. And then the previous problem wasn't the problem. That's not the issue, right? It's a shift of perception. With their lives ended, they were reborn in Tushita heaven. So they got up there with the Buddha now. In Tushita heaven is a drum called Most Delightful. There again, another name. What's the drum's name? Most Delightful. Most Delightful. When they had been born in heaven, the drum sounded, declaring to them, no, the drum is speaking. How do we perceive of the objects in our life? Do we see them as having and containing sentience? I said, this is a real wake-up call when I started reading this. I thought, I've got to respect these things more, right? How do I see this? This is, right? And or the robe that I'm wearing, this is a sentient being, right? I mean, this is talking about a drum talking. What does that mean for a drum to be talking? But you can think of maybe the bowl that you eat from or the cup that you drink from as a sentient being, as having sentience, as having feeling. I mean, it's not the same. If we want to talk science, I mean, you're not going to find a nervous system. You're not going to find a mouth. But you do find it infused with energy, right? All the atoms. How many atoms are in a cup? How many atoms, right? Just billions. Okay. Oh, godlings, right? So these beings that were tormented in hell are now godlings. Oh, godlings. Because your minds were not indulgent. Okay, this is what they did. Because your minds were not indulgent. What does it mean to indulge? You know what it means. We enjoyed indulgence. Right? Coffee indulgence. Too much movies, right? Too much this, too much that. Because your minds were not indulgent. Well, he doesn't say the specifics there, but the cause is the mind that's indulgent. He doesn't talk about the specifics. And you planted roots of goodness in the presence of Buddhas. You planted roots of goodness. Wow, what did they do? They started having some trust in the Dharma, in the teachings of the Buddha, in the presence of the Buddha. That's key too. You've got to feel the presence of the Buddha. The Buddha is present. Nonin is present here. He's here. Can feel, and I felt that last night too when we were doing that. Oh, Nonin's watching here. Kyoki's here. There, she's watching.
I thought that too.
Right? Yeah, they're here. Daikon Nonin. Yeah, he's here. He's in, and even this whole building, right? This center, the land as well. It's alive. It's watching. And if we come from that perspective, and take and place our faith in the Buddha, this is what he said. This is how you got out of your hell realm, right? You weren't, one thing is you weren't indulgent, right? You didn't overextend yourself. That's not saying you shouldn't have pleasure. You can't live without some degree of enjoyment. And he does talk about joy too. So it's not about that, but not overindulgence. That's the killer, right? And the second thing was what did he do? In the presence of the Buddha, planted seeds of goodness, right? You had some kind of trust in what the teacher, what the Buddha is teaching, right? That's why, he says, that's why you were born in this place. And it also says, and because in the past you associated with the wise, that's the Sangha, right? That's you all. That's all of us, myself included. You associated with the wise. and by the great spiritual power of Vairochana. Who's Vairochana?
Universal or cosmic Buddha?
Yeah, this idea of well, not an idea, but a Vairochana. Yeah, this Buddha that is not a singular entity, but the entire, this is where Buddhism and Zen just, the Buddha has another body. It's not just this physical, historical body, but the body of the cosmos is also associated with the body of the Buddha. But it says about this Vairochana, by the great spiritual power of Vairochana. So this is talking about something mysterious, the great spiritual power of Vairochana, something mysterious beyond our control. So yeah, we can refrain from indulgence. We can plant seeds of goodness. That's all good. But there's also something mysterious at work that we can't quite explain away or comprehend or locate or grab hold of that is at work. I mean, I'm just thinking of this space here, something mysterious, more than our efforts. There's something more than just our individual efforts or even our collective efforts at work here. Right? That's a spiritual power. The great, and we call that, or this could be called, the name for that is, let's put a name on that. Vairochana, let's label it Vairochana. That's what the Avatamsaka Sutra names this great spiritual power, this sense of something is emerging here that's beyond my control. You didn't cause your heart to just beat right now. We name that. What's the name? Well, let's give a name to that. Let's call it Vairochana. You could put a good positive name on that. Right? Why not? If we're going to name the bad things as a way to disentangle ourselves from them, like our negative thinking, why not put a name, a label on those things that are mysterious and beyond our comprehension, like the fact that your heart just beat. Right? Did you do that? Did you go like this? Somebody didn't do that. You didn't do it, did you? What is that? Right? Let's name it. Vairochana. Let's name it Vairochana. Right? Or we could say the same thing about the leaves on the trees out there. How are they growing? How did that happen? I mean, we can understand a lot about the process and photosynthesis and the relationship between the water and the earth, the air and the heat from the sun, and going into the growth of that. But still, right? I mean, still, yeah, you can't do it in the absence of those things, but still, those causes and conditions create this wonderful, these beings called, that we labeled trees. And whatever that is that happens there, let's give it a label. Vairochana. This is Vairochana. We resist that. I know, it's like we resist putting a good label on something mysterious. We want to take the labels off, or put the labels on the negative things. Right? So let's put the labels on the positive. All right. Yeah.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, please.
So when you're talking about, the essence that's here in the house and the land, and that's, the mystery is that it's there. However, people created. They didn't
Right.
create that, but you've done ceremony, the calling in of. So humans are, setting up the structure? Are they allowing that mystery?
I mean, it's all participation, right? When you really look at it, it's hard to distinguish between Vairochana and what we're doing, our own efforts. It's just very blurry. Yeah. not a dualistic kind of. I mean, we want to make it dualistic and say, okay, there's me and then there's Vairochana. But it's not, I don't think it's that dualistic. Yeah.
Because we are Buddha.
We are, yeah, we're working. Yeah, we got to be careful. As soon as we say, all right, I'm Buddha, then we create a dualism, another kind of dualism, which is, so it's just this walking this fine line, right? We're just walking this fine line. It's good. Well, let's look a little bit more, see if it doesn't get resolved. I don't know. All right, so, okay. And because in the past you associated with the wise, with the Sangha, with the community, and by the great spiritual power of Vairochana, you have been born in this heaven after the end of your life elsewhere. So this is the drum speaking to the these beings that were in hell. Right? The 1,000-spoked wheels on the soles of my feet. Now this is the Buddha speaking. The 1,000-spoked wheels on the soles of my feet. Wow, okay. Don't you just love the physicalness of our practice? Practice is very, very physical. It's body-based. You can look at the sole of your feet. Wow, I need to wash my feet. Look at all those cracks. They need some lotion. But no, that's how we see our feet. Look, isn't that how we look at your foot? I mean, again, he does it with the hand. Now we're talking about the foot. What would you do without your feet? Oh my gosh, right? So he's calling our attention literally to our own feet, right? Our own feet are just, well, I can't even imagine a body without feet. I mean, I've seen, it's a horrible thing, right? But we have feet. Wow. Right? No, Dogen says, what did you bring back from Japan? The nose is vertical, the eyes are horizontal. That's the miracle. Huh? We have feet. That's a miracle. Who would have thought? Right? So this is reorienting us. This story is reorienting us to the miracles that we just overlook. We've got feet. We've got hands. The 1,000-spoke wheels on the soles of my feet, as an enlightening being, were called, what? I'm going to give them another name. Pure virtue. Right? No, I'm sorry. No, they were called King of Universal Light. King of Universal Light. So the king, what's the king? The utmost, right? The King of Universal Light. You know, when you're doing walking meditation, you can think about the soles of your feet in that way. Right? The light emanating from your own feet as an entranceway into the miracle of walking, the miracle of having feet. The King of Universal Light. They had an embellishment. Now, okay, here's another embellishment called the foremost sphere, always emanating 40 kinds of light. All right? So the light has light. Among them, a light called pure virtue, illumining as many worlds as atoms. Whoa! Wait, how many Buddha fields were there in the past statement?
10. Right?
10? Okay, I'll get this number. As many atoms in 100 trillion Buddha lands.
Right.
100 trillion Buddha lands.
It's like, why not just say everything? You know,
Right, but everything, we've
yeah.
overused that word, right? We could say that everything.
Everything is like one thing, as opposed to 10 million, 10 trillion Buddha lands.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is really forcing us to use, like we do say that. We'll use the word the universe, we'll use the word everything or everywhere. We'll use those words, but they've been so overused that we've gotten caught in the concept of them and we don't experience the reality. And so by putting a different label on it, how about let's put on it as many atoms as in 10 trillion Buddha fields. Then you get a more of a visceral sense of space, of the vastness of space, right? Causing all sentient beings to develop maturity according to their various actions and inclinations. Sentient beings in excruciating pain, in uninterrupted hell, encountering this light, were born in Tushita heaven after their lives ended. Right? So, what is this saying? Like, okay, here's the problem and here's the solution. Right? It's kind of, when you're in hell, and I don't mean that literally. Actually, no, I don't mean that as like an afterlife thing. But when you're in a hell realm, we need to hear the Dharma. We need to trust the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? When they were born in heaven, they heard the sound of the celestial drum declare to them, here it is, very good, godlings, the enlightening being, Vairochana, has entered undefiled concentration. You should pay respects. Then the godlings, hearing this exhortation from the sound of the celestial drum, thought, how wonderful. What is the here's the great question. What is the cause of this subtle sound? What is the cause of this subtle sound? They want to know. What caused this sound to appear from the drum? Right? What caused this sound? You know, it's like my 6-month-old child, Pema, when she hears me talking or singing, if I sing to her, what does she do? And if I'm holding her, what do you think she does?
Smile.
Does she smile or say back?
She does smile, but you know what she does with her hands? She wants to grab my mouth. She wants to know where's the origin of this sound? Just like, you know, you put something in front of a baby and they want to feel it, they want to touch it. So if you sing to her, she reaches up for the sound. She wants to know where is this? I want to touch it. Right? That's amazing to think. So, in the same way, these godlings want to know what's the cause of this sound. They want to grasp it. The drum answered, the sound I make is produced by the power of roots of goodness. What can you say? That's how it's made. Godlings, just as I speak of myself without attachment to self or to what is mine, that's another key, right? We can speak of ourself, I exist, without attachment to self, right? Or of what is mine, right? What is yours? We can speak of those things without attachment to them. So too do the Buddhas say they are Buddhas, yet have no attachment to I or mine. Just as my sound does not come from the east or from the west, from the south, the north, or the intermediate directions, or the zenith or nadir, in the same way, the achievement of Buddhahood as a consequence of actions, this is the key thing. The achievement of Buddhahood, now that's what we're after, right? If you go from here I'm suffering and I want to go to the end of suffering, right? That's the usual Western way of thinking. I'm suffering, how do I get to the end of suffering? Now, listen to this. How do you get to Buddhahood? All right. The achievement of Buddhahood as a consequence of actions does not come from any of the 10 directions. It doesn't come from any of the 10 directions. Usually we think, if I do this thing, then I'll get that result. Right? He said, it is as when you were in hell before. The hell and your bodies did not come from any of the 10 directions. It was only due to your deluded evil deeds and bondage by folly that you were incarnated in hell. This has no basis. It does not come from anywhere. Right? It doesn't come. So this is what I'm talking about when I say non-origination. And this may not make a lot of sense on a first reading, initial reading. And I think getting our minds wrapped around what this is, this non-origination, requires some concentration. But again, we tend to think of in terms of cause and effect, and this isn't denying cause and effect. If you continue to read, it goes into this a little bit more around different images, like a mirror, and anyways, it's a lot to bite off in one Dharma talk. But let me just say that we tend to think that, or we tend to blame ourselves or blame others for why things are the way they are. And that's a kind of a pointing, it's in a sense pointing in a particular direction. Saying it comes from there and we can point to it. And that's the problem. Or when it comes to the enlightenment of the Buddha, we say, oh, it comes because he did that. Right? He did something, and then, okay, if I just do that. But there's something more mysterious at work here when we're talking and speaking in terms of non-origination. It's not a separate self, there's not this separate self doing this, but the whole universe gathers itself up, and we're not in charge of that, right? The whole universe puts itself where we are sitting, right? Where you sit is the enlightenment throne of the Buddha. And all we're doing is just receiving when we sit. When we sit zazen, we're simply receiving that. So in conclusion, this is a different way of understanding our experience. And I don't mean just when we're sitting zazen, but the world in general. It's a different way of experiencing, right? As opposed to this idea of a separate self going around and having experiences. There is how do you explain that? It's not that. But we can put a word on it. Let's call it Vairochana. We can put a name, we can put a label on it. Right? Vairochana is happening right now. All right, thank you.
Did you record?